Now here we are. Hello guys, welcome to the first episode of Cooking Together Online, a series put together as part of Connecting Kingston, by the social enterprise Colombo UK. During the lockdown, we've all been at home. Sorry, bear with us. There's a little bit of an echo, so we'll just sort out this technical problem. And I think that's all clear. Great. Okay, let's start again. I'm sure everyone now is on there on YouTube. Hello, you're there. Hello everyone over there. Welcome to the first episode of Cooking Together Online. It's a series put together as part of Connecting Kingston, initiative by the social enterprise Colombo UK. Now, during the lockdown, we've all been in our homes and most of us have been cooking for ourselves. So what we wanted to do is connect everyone here with cooking together. And hopefully we'll learn a thing or two about some dishes that we think we already know everything about. And on the side of that, we'll have a few discussions about multicultural Britain in 2020. My name is Lafi Patapola. I'm joined by my partner, Radhani, who's going to help me as we're led through. And what we're going to do is we're going to cook a dish that has its roots in India, but really wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the mix of Indian and British culture that we have now, I think. To lead us through this, I have Kumud Gandhi, from the founder of the Cooking Academy, a prestigious cooking school that has a personal touch. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Kumud?
Yes, so my first career was in banking. I took a career break to have children, and I've come from a really big foodie family, and that's always been a big part of our culture and our family. And I wanted to make my baby food for my children, so I studied food science. Of course, I could have done it without, but I come from a family of chemists. So my mother's side of the family are chemists, and my father's side of the family is spice merchants. So I've always grown up understanding food from a chemical point of view. My family originates from India, so of course we believe in the Ayurvedic properties of food. So this has always been my life. So when I had the opportunity to look at the science behind food, I kind of found it very interesting, and so studied it just for fun. And then that kind of developed into a career. So first of all in catering, and then I think I really found my true kind of love, which is to share what I know with other people in order that they might be able to enjoy food the way I do with my family. So it's kind of been a checkered way of getting there, but I've got to a position where I really understood what I want with food and how I want to share it with other people.
Nice. Okay, I understand. Oh, that's great. And that's amazing, the background that you have with all of those things coming together, you know, and it really lets us look at cooking in a different way, which we're really happy to have you on board and to learn from you whilst doing this. I'd also like to take a second before I introduce our other guest, to introduce Marcus. He is the founder of Colombo UK, and his wife Anna, who's also going to be taking part in the cooking class. Marcus, could you tell us a little bit about Colombo and about the agency and everything that's involved?
Yeah, hello everybody. So my name is Marcus. I have founded Colombo with a beautiful team here in the UK. We started in 2009, and in 2015 we then started trading as Colombo UK. We were trading as a different name before, already doing work focused on inclusion and diversity. So Colombo UK has a mission to try and get people to think differently around diversity and inclusion. So I also want to thank all the guests that are taking part, all the team that put that together, and it's really nice to see all coming out ready and as beautiful as it is. Thank you.
Absolutely. And speaking of those guests, I'd like to introduce one of our first ones, which is Councillor Dai and his wife, Lata. If we can have them on screen. There we are. Hi guys. How you doing?
Okay, thank you.
Good. Really glad to have you on board and to take your time out. As a councilman, I'm sure you're quite busy in your day-to-day, so we're really fortunate to have you here to help us with the cooking.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
No, thank you. And then also we have Paul Cox and his wife Chantal, who are also here. Hi guys. Paul has done loads of amazing work in Kingston and is a beneficiary of many trusts and has invested a lot in building things in the community. So it's really wonderful to have you here in part of this initiative as well. Also, Chantal has done a lot of work and does a lot of projects with children and teaching, and it's great knowing things about you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
You go first.
Well, I am a Flemish-speaking Belgian. I moved to the UK 40 years ago when I got married. So my cooking skills are very traditional, based on French. And when I arrived in the UK, I had never had an Indian meal or a Chinese meal. So this is, and I have really no experience on cooking anything like I am doing today. So this will be very interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Fantastic. I think, you know, we're glad to have you and have this kind of experience, and the same even to cook this way. I think it'll be different for a lot of us, even if we're used to also cooking South Asian food. So, you know, I might pass back to Kumud to actually get us started and get us rolling, and so that we can continue discussing these kind of things, especially about your own personal relationships with cooking with these kinds of foods and culture in Britain.
Sorry, like I think we just there is also our guest Adrian.
Of course, how could I forget? I'm so used to having Adrian on our side. I haven't spoken about Adrian Ruddock. Hi, Adrian. You're a trustee of Colombo UK. You're very involved in that. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I mean, of course, I am part of the wallpaper because I've been part of the UK from the outset. So from the up, and I'm really excited about this this project that we're going into right now. When I'm not a trustee in Colombo UK, then I'm an IT sales manager. I've been doing that for lots of years, and I think that you know, over time, my journey through food, from my parents' Jamaican roots through to growing up in this country and now having a Hungarian wife, all has meant that there's been lots of different influences. So for me, this is a really important thing. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for including me in it.
Amazing. Well, no, thank you for having you here. And alongside that, of course, is also the other members of Colombo who I believe are also taking part. If we are able to see everybody and have a little wave, we've got Anna here in the team. They've all been involved in bringing this project together, as well as Chinua, Alex, Paul. There you are. Great to see you. And there we are, Anna. Hi, guys. How you doing? Really wonderful. Hi, Axa. Hey.
Hey.
Nice, guys. Very well done. Fantastic.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Vivian. Great. I mean, as you can see, we've got a whole mixed group of people taking part, and that's another wonderful thing about what we have here. There's Chinua, although I think we're seeing an empty space, but there he is, popping in with a dramatic entrance like that. You waiting on the side just to pop in there. Good stuff. So great, there we go. I mean, and we have so many more as well at home watching on YouTube. Please do take pictures, post online, hashtag Dishes of the New Britain. We'll be able to see these, bring those involved. If you have any comments and questions on YouTube, please put them on. We try and give shout outs and also bring in anything you might want to ask Kumud or the others. Okay, so with that, Kumud, please can we carry on and start the cooking?
Absolutely. So we're going to start from a position of, has everyone marinated their chicken from, to give it a little bit of a time to marinate? If they haven't, then I'm to run through what could go into that. But if we're starting from this position, then really we want to get this chicken onto a tray, and then we want to put it into the oven. So I think your oven should be preheated so that it's straight at temperature. Put it in for 20 to 25 minutes, and then that's going to be ready by the time our sauce is ready to go.
Fantastic. So, I just want to stop you there, just because I think that we would like to actually do a marinade for some people at home that maybe haven't actually done it yet. We've actually got some chicken on the side. We have got some pre-marinade, as a lot of you already have done. So it would be a great time now for everybody to turn on their ovens and have it set to preheat. What temperature was that you put that on?
180 degrees Fahrenheit.
Great. So I'll have that on there. And then whilst we do that, let's just go through the initial process of marinating. If you want to lead us through it, we have all the chicken and everything ready here to go forward.
Okay. Okay, so when we start, we always want to have the chicken to one side, an empty bowl, and then all of your ingredients laid out. And the reason that even though on the instructions it might say chicken as the first lead-in entry, you want to put that to one side and create the marinade in an empty bowl so that you can taste it, you can adjust it as you go along, and you can rectify it to achieve the flavors that you want. Whereas if the chicken is already in there, then it's not going to allow you to do that. So chicken to one side, and always start with the liquids first. So in that case, it's going to be your yogurt. You're going to have all of the wet items. So that's going to be your natural yogurt, your oil. Mix those together first.
Sure. So we'll bring in the yogurt now. Okay. And then our rapeseed oil. Yes, it was 1 tablespoon of yogurt, right?
Yes, so it's about 50 grams, so a generous tablespoon of yogurt would be fine.
Sure. So that's the oil and the yogurt going in.
The lemon juice.
And a
lemon juice. 1 tablespoon would be around about half a lemon or thereabouts. So if you're using a fresh lemon, then half a lemon. So now give that a little mix around so that the lemon juice can start to cut into the yogurt. And then once you mix that around, again, add the next wet ingredient, which is going to be your garlic and your ginger.
Garlic and ginger.
The 2 teaspoons of garlic and 2 teaspoons of ginger.
Ginger.
That's it, and now give that a little mix around. So again, they begin to activate as the spice is going.
Okay.
Okay, so now we want 2 teaspoons of paprika.
Paprika.
And that's going to give you depth of field. So it's going to give you depth of flavor. It's going to give you some wonderful red color so that you're not using artificial ingredients to food coloring.
Well, I noticed when we're making the marinade, it's really nice how each flavor and each ingredient even, it changes the whole consistency and everything. You can really see what kind of impact it makes.
Yeah. And layering it in this way is a really good, it's amazing how you can have 8 different flavors in there, and yet when you taste it, you will be able to taste each flavor perfectly balanced. Okay. Now we want 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric.
1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. And so can we see if the other guests are also, everybody already been able to do their marinades, or will people be currently following along? Oh, nice, of course, there you are, Chantal. So you've got nicely marinated. Right? And Councillor?
Yes.
Nice, great.
But
Yeah, we have marinated as well. Yeah.
Aha, yes, you have already marinated. Well done.
okay, so we want 1/2 teaspoon of red chili powder.
Just 1 teaspoon.
1 teaspoon of red chili powder. Very nice, Adrian. I like that.
2 teaspoons of cumin, 2 teaspoons of ground cumin,
Yes.
and 1 teaspoon of coriander, ground coriander. And then finally, 1 tablespoon or a good generous pinch of fresh coriander.
Yes. That's as generous as we can go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that a mix around. And now have a little taste. Make sure that you're happy with the flavors
You
that you've
mentioned
got.
that you're tasting.
And did I mention the salt? Sorry, 1 teaspoon of salt.
You'd mentioned before as well in the pre-release video that we made about marinating that you should taste it on your hand as opposed to off the spoon, right?
Yes, and that's really important because when you taste off a spoon, for a moment, your senses pick up the temperature and the consistency of the spoon, which is cold metal. Whereas if you taste from your hand, there is no downtime and the brain automatically takes the ingredient rather than thinking about the metal spoon, the temperature, and a metal instrument in your mouth is quite kind of strange. And so actually tasting from your hands, which is why, in India we eat with our hands, and that's a large part of it because it increases the sensitivity and the flavors of the food that you're eating.
Understood. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a really good tip to remember and know so often of it eating off the spoon and you feel that everything you're doing.
Good. So if you mix that around, then, and you're happy with all the flavors, then put your chicken in and give it a really good mix around.
Sure. Okay, I won't bother touching it. I don't have that finesse in my hands, you see. I'm just good for plate.
So ideally, if you can marinate this the night before, then perfect. If you're short of time, then even if it's just an hour or so, that's still going to be very good. And then we're ready to lay out the chicken onto a tray and put it in the oven. And this bit is also, it's not just a case of, pouring it out into the tray. I'll show you how to do this because this is also quite important. So we're going to move on to the next bit where we're going to lay the ingredients out onto a tray. Now I've got a tray and I've actually foiled it. I've covered it with a bit of foil so that it makes the washing process a bit easier. And then we're just going to take the pieces of chicken and put it
just to check, this will now be for everybody. So even everybody who's now got the marinade done.
And
So,
let's join in.
Yes, exactly. So now everybody will be joining in. If you've already done your marinade, if you get your oven tray ready, that would have been preheated.
If it isn't spoiled, don't worry, it's fine. It's not proper. It just makes it easier on the washing.
Sure.
And with
We'll just slowly make sure, because we're going to take a little bit of time to do this, and take our time with getting
This is only for people with the
So
marinade.
could you just go through that again with the process for putting the foil down and for the tray, and what's the best way to do it?
So I put the tray here, and what I'm doing is I've just literally covered it in foil. Make sure that the sills of it is reflecting up, so that the heat, the temperature, will actually reflect and come back onto the chicken. So it's the shiny side up when you're doing this.
Sure. Okay, so let's just lay that down.
Nineteen and the marinate
No.
Nice. So just to recap for people that might have just joined us, here we are. We've got the marinade ready for the chicken. So you already bring out your marinated chicken right here, and we're now basically getting the oven ready. We've preheated the oven, and we're getting the oven tray ready to be able to put those ingredients on to put into the oven. And then afterwards, come into the sauce. The oven. But we'll just take our time to slowly make sure that everybody's able to do this bit.
They don't need that for marination.
So again, just to recap, that this is a Colombo UK event that we're doing to try and get basically an awareness through to everybody, as well as also connecting with each other on cooking and being able to learn a great dish and a great way of making it. We're also trying to talk a little bit about the face of Britain with British cuisine, and also all of us here. Like we said, we have so many great guests from so many different backgrounds who are part of this country and this society. And I wanted to take a second to also ask Kumid, actually, again, in terms of your background, you'd mentioned your family and what got you and how you got into cooking itself and your own passions, but also with your own connection with South Asian cuisine. Could you explain a little bit more about where's your background from itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents are both from India, from Northwest India, from Gujarat. I've grown up eating very traditional food, so traditional from a sense of traditional Indian, traditional English. So at school, I had school dinners, and so that was very English food. And then in between all that, and then I suppose it was really when I moved to university, and I started to try all kinds of other different cuisines. But in the home, we had Gujarati, Indian food, and all kinds of ranges of food. And we used to cook English food at home too. But principally, I grew up knowing Indian food very well. I travelled to India and learned a lot of my craft in India. And it's amazing how much of a family experience this is. So, food starts from a very early age. You grow up kind of kneeling on a chair, helping your family, your aunts, your mother, your sisters to cook. So it's kind of very much my father used to grow a lot of his own herbs and spices as well, just really as a hobby. It was his kind of mental downtime. And I spent a lot of time learning from him how to grow herbs and spices, and especially ones that you couldn't get so easily. So, for example, we used to grow our own mustard, grow our own coriander, because it was quite difficult to get in the shops. So I've grown up with a really good grounding of what food is, what spices are, and I've created a marriage of two. So there's a lot of food, a lot of European food, Mediterranean food, and Middle Eastern food, in which I will slightly cross-fertilize the use of spices, because I also know what their medicinal values and their herbal values are.
Sure.
So incorporate them into my diet.
And you mentioned there that when you came, you said it was quite hard to find. That's why you were growing at home. So did you find that when you were in England, that at the time there just wasn't access to those kind of things that you were so used to having back at home?
Yes, and so there was a lot of spices that simply weren't imported. We used to have all of our spices flown in from India because obviously that's our business, and we are very discerning about spices we use. But there were simply fresh herbs and fresh things that you couldn't find locally, and so we tend to grow them. And it's because of that emerged this kind of thing called curry powder, which doesn't exist in India. I mean, there are lots of spice blends, but the crude version of curry powder, which then became what European people tended to make curries out of, was a super cheap but crude way of making curry. And that was the very early curries.
I see. Let me keep you there whilst I'm going to put the chicken into the oven, and we're going to carry on exactly with that discussion whilst we do this.
I just want to, when you put the chicken on the tray, it's really important that the chicken pieces aren't touching each other. And there's a really good reason for that. If the chicken pieces touch each other, then they will just begin to boil, okay? And what you want is a nice golden charring on the chicken, and you want it to almost kind of cook up, almost like a kind of fab type of thing. So it's really important when you lay it out, don't allow them to, and so that way you'll get a nice bit of charring on it, and they will.
Okay, understood. Nice. I can see the others that are doing it. We saw there Chantal having the side. So just to carry on from what you were saying there, especially about curry powder and those kind of things. If I move to Councilman Guy, if we have him up. Hi guys. I'd like to ask, you've also been in this country for a long time, and experience as well with South Asian cooking. Have you found in the area that you're in when you were here, that it was hard to get hold of spices and those kind of things?
Yeah, actually,
Had a little pause there. Sorry.
I arrived in this country as a student.
I think, as is always the case with these kind of things, the Zoom calls had a little bit of a technical issue there. So what we'll do is we'll come back to you, Councilman. We're just going to move to Paul and Chantal very quickly and ask you guys, hi. So again, as well, you had said that you haven't had as much of experience with South Asian cooking, but what's your, thank you very much, sorry, I'm so bad at doing things at the same time. What's your experience basically with that kind of thing, you know, with how you've looked at South Asian food and getting things like curry powder as opposed to individual spices and things?
Well, I knew about the curry powder, that it's something that was made artificially for European tastes, but it's something that you put together just like we have done now here. And as I said, I did not have any experience of Asian cooking, only then other than going to Indian restaurants or Keralan restaurants. I did spend some time in Sri Lanka last century and in another lifetime, but otherwise my experience. So this is really good and interesting. Yes, thank you. And can I ask as well, so I have had chicken tikka, but the pieces have always been like bite-sized pieces, not this size. So yesterday I thought, shall I cut this chicken up in smaller bite-sized pieces or leave it as it is?
So the answer is yes, you should. I've just got a bit of difficulty at the moment because of my hand. I would normally cut the pieces up, but absolutely, it's much better that they are bite-sized pieces because the smaller the surface area, the more penetration of the spices, and therefore it's going to be a better flavour for you. But I was kind of thinking about the cutting up and then also putting onto the tray. For myself personally, that would have been difficult. But always, when you're at home doing this yourself, by all means, bite-sized pieces is always better.
Okay, thank you.
And also with that, Councilman, if we can see if you're able to get back on.
Introducing Belgium through French.
Maybe not. Okay. There we go. Hi, guys.
Yeah, I arrived in this country 50 years ago as a student. At the time, I had to learn to cook. So there was no spices available. So we used to get the spices from Sri Lanka, chili powder, curry powder, and all those items. And then since I got married in 1976, my wife's been doing all the cooking. But now there are most of the things are available in the convenience stores anyway. So we don't have that kind of problem.
Okay, I see. Of course. So what I wanted to ask, one thing is if everybody's put everything in the oven to make sure what the timing is for that. Can we have, how long should that really be in the oven for?
So that should be in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes.
Okay,
so
25 minutes.
Good preheated oven, that should take 20 minutes.
Okay, so we'll just make sure to be aware of the time on that. It's now 12:30, so we'll come back to that around 12:50, unless of course, like Chantal, you put on a timer, which is very coordinated.
Electric.
And can we just make sure, how is everybody else doing on the cooking? Paul, we have you live on the screen. Good work. Nice, everything going well. And hopefully everybody else is good also at home. Nice, Anna. Good. Great work. Oh, he needs a break. It's all got too much. No, he's okay. Asians, all good. Great. That's all good. Can we also, before we then just start on to making the sauce, can I ask about the history of the dish as far as you know it and what your perspective is of it? Because there's always been a few different things that people have said, how chicken tikka masala came to be, talk of it being from, a mix from a Scottish like influences and having some British influences in it, as opposed to just being a South Asian dish that was made there and brought over here. Can you enlighten us a little bit about that?
Yes, so the concept of a creamy chicken dish or a creamy anything dish existed long before the concept of chicken tikka masala. And it would have been perhaps called something Mark and Raja or something along those lines. because makan means cream. And so, the concept of using cream came from the Mughal Empire, the Mughal era in India, and was already very common. The concept of using yogurt to marinate was also very common, because that was allowed you to tenderize the meat. And so that allowed the meats to become very soft and also digestible. So those concepts already existed in India. Now, what's happened over time, and certainly, I think it seems to emanate from Scotland, but there are a couple of kind of stories around somebody wanted an Indian dish, the regular food was too spicy for them, so the chef entered a kind of tomato soup and added a few spices to it, and in order to try and kind of break out the redness of it, also added some cream, and so was born this kind of chicken tikka masala with a very red, creamy sauce. So that's one theory. And then there are other theories which talk about a regular tomato sauce-based kind of dish, which was overly hot, and so they added a lot of cream into it in order to make it more palatable. Because when you're working with spices and chilies, if you've overheated something, then the kind of the antidote to the heat is, of course, fat, not water. So by adding fat into a dish, something like butter or cream or yogurt, of course, yogurt, then you would be able to bring the heat down, and of course it would change the color of the dish because of the whiteness of the milk or cream.
Okay. So really, I mean, it comes to play because obviously there's a certain things that the communities here also required from the cooking that we had that made birth that new kind of style of cooking and flavor, which is something, that even for us from the traditional South Asian side also enjoy and not always happen. There's always stereotypes that, we need everything to be so chilly and so hot. And
yes.
Sometimes, that isn't always the case. If I could speak to Adrian for a second, you're coming from a different background, but have you experienced anything of a similar kind of style yourself as also being part of Britain and British culture?
Yes, I mean, when I was growing up, when I was a child, I remember school dinners as well, and the flavors of the food were quite different to the way that they are now. I do remember as a child that as I grew up in a relatively small village, that my parents would have to forage back to their families, either in Southall or up in North London by Tottenham, to actually get the ingredients that we need for the kind of cooking that I had as I was growing up, rice and peas, as you expect, curry goat, etc. As time went on, then more sort of Caribbean food encroached and got closer. So Reading is close by, lots of Caribbean food there as time went on. The thing about the Caribbean, of course, though, is that there was a fusion of people and therefore a fusion of flavors anyway. So there's a South Asian input. Also, there's an African input, and of course, stuff that was created in the Caribbean itself. So the whole fusion cooking is something that I'm very much used to.
Okay, and that shows that all of our from very different places, and us all coming here and really integrated and built into a new fabric of what could be considered a new multicultural Britain. I think that really comes through in everything that we do, and especially in this dish. And whilst I'd like to continue with this, I definitely know that we should also continue with the cooking. So, can you please take us on through the next step if you start that? But actually, what I should point out before anything else is very much that this recipe is from your book, A Cupboard Full of Spices. Right? If you could talk a little bit more about this. We've certainly been able to look through, and it's an amazing book. I think it's beautifully done, and there's so many wonderful recipes in here. But could you tell us a little bit more about the book itself?
Absolutely, yes. So I started about 10 years ago, and I was explaining the theory behind the spices, the practical application of how, when, why, but most of all the flavors and the characteristics of the spices, in order that you could understand what contribution each spice is making. And that's quite key, because when you understand how a spice is going to change a flavor, you can then not only use that spice in that dish, but then you'll be able to extrapolate and use that one particular spice in any number of dishes, in any cuisine, no matter what the genre of food. And so to me, understanding this is the most fundamental part of any cooking process. It doesn't matter what genre of food you are cooking. And so we take a lot of time to explain what it is that you're cooking with and why you're adding the ingredients. So you will see at the early part of the book takes time to explain the methodology, the practical use, and all the spices that you're going to be cooking with in that recipe book. And it gives you both the characteristic of the spice, and it also tells you what the medicinal and nutritional value of the spice is, so that you begin to understand why you should use it, and not just when to use it, but also how, why. Why is the most important part. Because cooking is not just about taste, and if we begin to only make food about taste, then we're really missing the key point about why we're eating. And so the why is the most important part. And so the book talks a lot about why you're adding a certain spice. And so it was just a natural conclusion that, at the end of the class, people would say, well, that's a lot to remember. How am I going to take all that in and, apply that at home? And so the book evolved from the cookery classes and the teaching, and that give our customers a compendium of knowledge to be able to go away with. And it's almost like the Indian Bible in terms of cookery.
That's an amazing summary of what that is. And I hope that a lot of other people, if they weren't able to see there, are able to purchase that. You can find that online through its own website, www.cookingacademy.com or .co.uk, isn't it?
Yes.
As well as other retailers. So let's go back to the cooking now very quickly, and then we'll carry on with the conversation. So on to the next step.
Okay, so you've got your ingredients all laid out, and the first thing that you're going to look at is, of course, the whole spices. So I'm going to just put this on as best I can, just so that I'm kind of slightly cooking along with you, because it will make it easier for me to explain what's going on exactly. So,
sure. So so everybody should be getting their ready on their hobs with their dishes.
Yes.
So he does that.
I want all the whole spices, so the bay leaves, the cardamom, and the cinnamon.
So bay leaf, cardamom, and cinnamon. So those would be the things that you set up first.
Bay leaf. Yes.
It's also important that whatever pan you're cooking with, you have a very good lid. It's going to completely seal the pan so that the steam stays in the pan, okay? That's important. So, and the pan is beginning to heat, and what I want you to start off by doing is make sure that the pan is hot before you add the oil in, okay?
Okay, so the pan should be hot before the oil goes in. Got you.
So nice and hot. When the pan's hot, you'll be able to tell, because then it will be uncomfortable for you to hold your hand over the top of the pan.
So, okay, so the heat has to be, so you should be able to hold your hand over it, but not for a long time, is that right?
I can feel the heat, and there's a safety reason for that. If you put cold oil into a cold pan, it's going to take a long time for it to heat up. And the temptation is to go and do something else whilst your pan is now beginning to get hot with oil in it, which is dangerous. So just keep the pan on, and when it's nice and hot, then pour the oil in. Okay. So my 4 tablespoons of oil has gone in.
Yeah.
And then when the oil, just circle it around the pan. So now the oil is going to get hot from the heat of the metal pan. And then as soon as you've done that, I want you to start by adding the biggest and the most dense ingredients in, which is of course going to be your cinnamon, okay? So the cinnamon goes in first, and just allow the cinnamon to saute in this hot oil. And it should be sizzling. You should be able to hear and see the cinnamon sizzling in the hot oil.
Can I just ask, Kumud? We have quite large sticks of cinnamon. Is that what you mean by the 3 sticks are large sticks?
Yes, but how big is it? Is it about 2 inches?
Is that, yes, 2 inches?
That's fine, chuck it in.
Okay, great.
Okay, now I want you to do the cardamom, and before you throw the cardamom in, make sure you pop it. So the cardamom is sealed hot. Just press it on the wooden surface or surfaces.
Sorry, there. So is that to keep it or just press down? Do you take the actual cardamom and then you basically press it down? Is that right?
Always, always. If you don't do this, you are keeping all the flavour inside the cardamom, and the flavour isn't going to leak out. And therefore, you need more cardamom to get the same flavour. So it's good to do this, okay? And then throw your cardamom. So always.
Cool. If I could slow you down for a second, just because it's taking us a little bit of time to catch up with you. Bear with it. Okay, so we're putting in the cardamom.
So pop the cardamom in. And always have all your ingredients ready, because this process should only take a few seconds, if you like. And then finally add your bay leaves, and the bay leaves will start to pop because they're quite fresh. So the bay leaves will go in. Make sure that the onions are ready to go in straight on the back of the bay leaves, okay? So have your onions and bay leaves almost ready simultaneously. Put them in, let the bay leaves butter around, then throw the onions in, okay? So finally.
So again, with everybody, obviously, we'll get these ingredients in and then we can start the sauteing process.
I'm just going to pause this so that if people are chopping onions, then they can have the chopped.
Sure, great. So at this point, we're able to just pause for a second. So that obviously, yes, we will have a few people that will be chopping onions. And in that time, can I actually ask, so Councilman and his wife, if we could bring them up for a second, if they're available. Hi guys, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, I have done a lot of cooking, so it's very easy for me to follow. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
but you guys
normally cook sort of South Indian dish.
South Asian food yourselves. Can you tell us again a little
South Indian dish we normally cook, and it's a bit hot, it's spicy hot.
I think we've just had it pause again on that. So what I'll do is I'll just jump through whilst we fix those technical issues there to Paul and Chantel.
Yes, hi.
Hi guys. I wanted to ask, as we said, and as Kumud was talking about those details about spices and what we have and how that's true of every kind of cooking, everything that we said, even with Adrian, of coming from different backgrounds and integrating that within British food. So tell us a bit about what you have cooked and what you do with the food that you do at home.
Well, when I first arrived in the UK, so a long time ago, I was only used to continental cooking. So one of my favourite dishes, and still is, so this would be my last meal on earth if I was allowed to choose, it would be mussels, chips and mayonnaise. So when I arrived in Kingston, I of course went to the market and the fish stall asking for mussels, and they said mussels, and nobody knew or they didn't have any available. So I said, well, I'll have mussels on a weekly basis, please. And then I became known as the mussels lady. A dish that's very common in Belgium as well would be veal, and nobody'd heard of veal, and it's not something that I could get. And so it was very much something that I brought to the UK from Belgium, from my background. And so we didn't cook with spices, and still my family in Belgium wouldn't cook an Indian or a spicy meal or a curry, as they would call it. So,
in other ways,
in fact, I had taken them to, before I was married, when they wanted to come to the UK and see what my wife was looking at, getting herself into who this guy was. I took them for an Indian meal, and well, it was not exactly a success because it was a very mild curry that I'd ordered for them, but they all started to sweat and drink water, and they just thought it was intolerable, really. So that was their first experience of me, which wasn't very successful, really.
Well, I mean, it's such a often thing that we joke about, you know, that we say that people can't take that kind of spice unless you live with it from birth. But obviously, there's the other side of it where people feel like they're pressured to be able to take spice. But I wonder if we bring up the councilman, if we can see. There with Lata and the councilman, maybe not currently, because it'd be great to get their take on it as well from their background to see what it's like. But Adrian, could you tell us a little bit on that? Same for yourself. Obviously, you've grown up, and we don't need to repeat again things that we've said in terms of, like you said, with your background. But I suppose you know you've seen that there's so many different things that make up what is British cuisine and British culture now. And I think, is there anything that you feel that you've experienced very much coming here that's added to your own intake of culture?
Most definitely. I think the cultural exchange is always two-way. Not all English food is like our school dinners. I remember our dinner lady saying, "We work really hard to make sure that your vegetables aren't crunchy." I mean, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, that's impossible," but that's how it was. But yes, I mean, we took on lots of things, English cooking, and of course, you know, going over to friends. As a child, I experienced more around English cooking than I had done previously. So I think there's a great exchange each way. But you're right, there is in some circles there is a pressure to have really hot food. Really necessary, and for some people they find it quite difficult. So when I first introduced my wife's family to Jamaican cooking, they did find it quite hot. Syrians don't really have super hot food, and I didn't even think it was very hot, and yet they're sweating as well. So I understand that experience. So yes, there's always an exchange, but we have to be careful that we're not over exchanging, shall we say.
Sure, exactly, that's true. I think if I go back to Kumid and just check in where we are with our dish, obviously we're sauteing these ingredients. How long really should we be doing this for now?
Okay. Now this is where sometimes it's very easy to go wrong, because there's almost like a bit of a haste in wanting to get the onions or move on with the dish, and in cooking the onions, that's one of the most important parts of the dishes. Because what we need to do is we need to make sure that the onions have softened completely so that they lose all of their acidity and texture. And you almost want them to become mushy. Now, a few minutes ago, I had the lid on my pan, and that's in order to ensure that they steam and they soften and they cook down. Now, it's really important that you do this, and this is the biggest investment when it comes to a curry. The time investment is in cooking the onions. And if you do that right, then you're going to get a really great consistency of the sauce. And that's where it's a kind of light bulb moment where people go, "Oh, I don't do my onions this way," or, you know, the temptation is to kind of just quickly, slightly fry them. But if you do that, you're not going to get the right consistencies.
Okay, so we just take our time. Sorry, to say that we should just take our time with it, basically, and let them.
Absolutely. Take your time. And a lid is handy because then that keeps all the steam in, and it stops you from making your kitchen very fragrant, but actually you want all the flavour to stay. You just want to be careful that when you lift the lid up, you don't let the water drip into the onions. So just be careful, take the lid off, and then as they begin to soften and break down, then we're going to start to add the garlic, the ginger, and so on.
Okay. Before we do that bit, could I just ask you, in terms of, so for your background, you're from Gujarat, is that right?
Yes.
I think there's a lot of cases where when we talk about South Asian food, it's so easy for it to be blanketed as a term for so many different styles of cooking. Right? You know, I'm Sinhalese, Sri Lankan, Councilman Dai and his wife are Tamil. you know, we get a lot of times where I think if I was to ask, say, Adrian, could you tell us a little bit about the differences between, you know, Gujarati cooking and or Sinhalese or Tamil dishes?
Sadly, without you know, spending time on deep research, I really couldn't.
That's it, which I understand. I think that's the thing where we have an issue probably in a lot of different groups where a whole different variety of food seems to get put into one category and things.
But it's a little bit like saying India's landmass is enormous, and so there are so many different states in India that the food can vary from state to state. And it's almost like saying that you're in India's landmass, you're incorporating Holland and Belgium and France and Germany and a bit of Spain. That's the landmass that it's covering. Right? So it would be like saying that Spanish cooking, when you say Indian food, it would be like saying Spanish cooking is the same as Italian cooking and you know, French cooking. Every state has different styles of cooking in India.
That's very well put. I think that is such a thing that I've always found frustrating as well, and also guilty of at the same time. I can be annoyed at it, but also find that I covered everything as a South Asian kind of style instead of really knowing all the intricacies between each different background and dishes that we make. Yeah.
Put the garlic and ginger in now. So if everyone's onions have completely softened down, can I ask you to add the garlic and the ginger?
Okay, so if we add the garlic and the ginger, and whilst we do that, could we ask Councilman Tyne and his wife, could you please tell us, actually bringing on that subject that we just talked about the Tamil community in Kingston? What we'll do is actually chop a bit more.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Sorry, I was asking Councilman Tyne if you could speak a little bit about yourself. You are a Tamil, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we are Tamil from Sri Lanka, and our cooking is similar to South Indian cooking.
Sorry, just to stop you there, I think there's a problem with your camera. I think there's something covering it.
That's right. Oh, sorry. Is it okay now?
Well, let's see. Can we see you now?
No.
Okay. What I will do, I'll come back on my mobile camera.
No problem. Whilst you do that,
check. So that's 2 teaspoons, is it, Kumar, the garlic and ginger?
Yes, and mix it around really well and incorporate it with the onions and let it cook only for 2 minutes. And then after 2 minutes, you want to add the tomatoes in as well, okay? And again, tomatoes in really well. And we're going to do what we did with the onions with the tomatoes as well, okay? So now, for those of you who were slightly ahead, then put the tomatoes in as well now, please.
Okay, great. So we'll put the tomatoes in that time. Okay. So we will come back to the Councilman once he's able to move forward with that. So then with the chicken right now, is that okay still at this time? What should we be checking? Should we be checking for something with it?
Yes, and you want to go back and check the chicken now. And so mix the tomatoes in very well and then check the chicken. The chicken should be ready to go.
So, and what with it, should we? Well, if you're looking at chicken in the oven, is there a certain way it should be looking for? Should it be golden brown, or I mean that's usually what when you're reading a recipe, you often see that as what you're looking. But is there something specific we're looking for here?
I'm just going to take chicken out of the oven and then I can answer your question.
Sure, no problem. Checking in with everybody there. How you doing, guys? If everyone gives us a wave there in the group, there you go. Everyone's very focused, looking at what they need to do, looking at the ingredients. Now's the time to also say hello to everybody that's on YouTube. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're enjoying taking part in this cooking class. I hope you're enjoying making this dish, and I certainly hope that you're going to enjoy as much as we are tasting it for ourselves. How are you guys doing, Paul, Chantel? We go to Paul. There we go. How are you guys? How's it going over there? Is
Yeah,
everything
good,
well for you?
good.
Good. You've been able
Smells
to.
good.
Good. Good. Nice. Okay, in terms of, could you tell us a little bit more about what you guys have been doing in Kingston? I know you do a lot of work in a different projects and things.
Okay. I was born in Kingston, and I started a business in Kingston in about 1969, and I started with Citroen 2CV, which most of you guys will not know, but it's a little French car. I started importing that into the UK, and the business grew and grew and grew, and we became Citroen dealers, and we were the biggest Citroen dealers in the UK. And we had lots of premises in Kingston, and we had lots of staff. And I was very much involved in community. I had the Kingston Basketball Club, which some of you may remember went to won every UK domestic championship, went into Europe, into the European Cup. I was chairman, I still am chairman of Kingston Boys Club, which is a charity that has raised money for youth in Kingston for many, many years. And I was a former chair of Kingston Voluntary Action, and I was introduced to Marcus by Quilombo years ago when I was in my early 30s. I was a member of the Samaritans in Surbiton. So I've been very much involved in raising money for local organisations in Kingston. And in 2003, we sold the business to a management buyout and entered a retirement, which meant that I got a lot busier than I was when I was running a business with 100 people. And basically still had very close connections with Kingston, working with youth organisations and helping businesses which need advice and are struggling at the moment. And so I'm very busy with that.
Of course, and so you've seen Kingston across a long period of time as well, and the change through it. Do you think you've seen a change with lots of different people coming into the community and the integration between different groups and how they've influenced each other?
Well, absolutely. I mean, of course, a lot of our work with the Kingston Boys Club was on the Cambridge estates, where Marcus is quite entrenched, and a lot of our young people then were from various backgrounds, and we had a very successful boys club there, which trained, well, originally boys in boxing and in weightlifting, things like that. We had an Olympic gold medalist, heavyweight boxer, but when things started to change, we then opened it up and it became a club for young people. And sadly, when there was a change of administration in the council and we did a presentation with, I think we had about 100 members there going through their paces in front of the new councillors, we were told that the councillors didn't sponsor blood sports. And I said, well, it's boxing, it's not fox hunting. And we lost our grant. And so we had to realign our way of running the organisation. And so we started with a European grant, a nursery there, which continues to this day. And that's a multi-ethnic nursery, very successful. It's got excellent when it had its last Ofsted inspection, and it serves the community in and around the Cambridge estate.
Amazing. I mean, I hope that we can continue to do that, and that's an amazing history of what you've achieved there and what you've done with that. I'd like to go back into more of this, but first I'll just check in with Kumud and see.
Yes.
We're taking the chicken out at this point, or anything else we should do?
I'd like you to take the chicken out and have a look. It should be cooked, but it also should have a nice crispy kind of slightly crunchy slight caramelization on it as well. Okay, let's check that, and then as soon as we've checked that, we need to also check the tomatoes here.
Okay, sure. So we'll check on that. Make sure that's fine. So then, if that's okay, should we be turning off our ovens at that point?
Well, let's see if the chicken is ready yet. So
Sure.
kick it now. I'd just like you to see what my chicken looks like. Okay, so can you see how
Nice. Yes. If you hold it to the side, yes, exactly to the side there. That's brilliant. Oh wow, that looks so good.
all nicely separate, and if I put my knife into the chicken, it should come out absolutely clear, and the water should be coming out of it. And I would be happy. So if your chicken is like, do check it. It will have the opportunity to cook in the sauce as well, so don't be too worried about it. But I just want this beautiful colouring on it.
Okay, so again, when we're going to check with a knife. I'll get a knife. Yeah, check it. And so you said that it should come clear, right? So nothing should stick to the knife as you stick it in.
That's right. And the shouldn't want to stick to the knife. It should come straight out.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you very much.
If the chicken is sticking to the knife, it means that it's not quite cooked yet.
Okay. And in that ours is ready, but in that case, should we stick it in basically for another 3 or 5 minutes or something?
Yes, literally just a couple of minutes.
Got you.
Now, this chicken, you could actually eat, assuming it's cooked, you could actually eat the chicken just as it is now. And, oh, lovely, very good.
Very good. We're having everyone give us a look at their chicken. Very nice. That's good.
Yes.
Very nice, guys.
Now, you should also be able to have that chicken and just check, because this chicken will stand on its own legs. It has all of the right flavor proportions and balances. So by all means, have a little taste, because if you just want the recipe and make this chicken perfectly possible.
It's right, and it's nice.
Okay, and
good.
you make your kebabs this way, so that you could literally just put that into a little pitta pocket with some salad, and you're away.
Oh, fantastic. And should we look at the sauce now, or have we got a couple minutes?
Yeah, have a look at the sauce now. And what I want to see is that the onions and the tomatoes have coagulated, and they're beginning to get lovely little pockets like this. And the oil has started to separate. If you see oil separation, then that means you're ready for the next stage, which is to start adding your spices. Okay? So give it a little stir. And then we're going to add the spices, and I'm going to walk through what those spices are.
Okay, before I have you go through those spices, Camille,
Yeah?
I'd just like to quickly check in with Councillor Thai and his wife, and
Hello?
see if we can get them working.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, yes. We'll just check to see if we can get you
We've
up.
been having some connection, so sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. It's great to have you back on. Just to let you finish off, you were saying about a person from Tamil heritage and working in Kingston, about the Tamil community there. There we go. I think, unfortunately, we're having still a little bit of a problem. Can you hear me, Councillor?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, if you could just tell us a little bit about your understanding or perspective of the Tamil community in Kingston.
Well, Tamil, I mean, as I said, I arrived in 1970. I did 2 years. So there are lots of. Can you hear me?
We can hear, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Sri Lanka.
I'm afraid, oh, I'm so sorry, but we have lost you there a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll just go back to Kumit because we need to carry on with the dishes and carry on with the spices. Go ahead, Kumit.
Okay, so now I'd like you to add your little tiny bit of chili. So I think it was half a teaspoon of chopped up chilies. So I'd like you to add that in, please.
Sure.
I'd like you to add in your tomato puree. So we want 1 tablespoon of tomato puree.
And that's just a normal tomato puree that we get from the tube, is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. And that's going to intensify both the flavour, but also actually the colour of the dish as well. And you want to really rely on getting your flavours and your colour from natural ingredients. So you're not going to help the dish. And now we're going to start to add our spices into here. So we would like a tablespoon of jaggery. Now, if you're not sure what jaggery is, literally just pure, neat, unadulterated sugar before it goes through the commercialization process. So this straight off the sugar cane, chopped up. It has no artificial colours or additives at all. It's literally just the sugar cane juice that has been dried. If you don't have jaggery, then use brown demerara sugar or honey, perhaps. That will do.
Okay, so brown sugar, and was that a teaspoon or a tablespoon?
Tablespoon.
No.
Teaspoon, okay. And where, so explain again, where is it that you can kind of get jaggery from? Jaggery is available in kind of
You can buy jaggery from some of the ethnic stores or have a look on our website because our jaggery is absolutely organic. No additives at all. It comes in neat little packs that you use, and I do all of my cooking. So even in Italian cooking, Middle Eastern cooking, if it calls for sugar, then I use jaggery. In Thai cookery especially, and it really does make your food taste as if it came from the sweetness of the food rather than something else. Okay, now add half a teaspoon of salt. Half a teaspoon of salt. We're going to add 2 teaspoons of ground cumin.
2 teaspoons of ground cumin, yes?
2 teaspoons of ground cumin. 1 teaspoon of 2 teaspoons of ground coriander.
Teaspoons of ground coriander.
Sorry, what one?
2 teaspoons of ground cumin and 2 teaspoons of ground coriander.
Nice, thank you.
Okay, and then we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of garam masala.
And can you explain out garam masala just a little bit there to everybody?
Yes, I will do in just a moment. I'm just going to add the other ingredients and then I can talk about it as we're stirring. We're going to add a teaspoon of dried mango powder, and I'll talk about that too. So a teaspoon of dried mango powder.
Yeah.
And then we're going to add a good generous tablespoon of fresh coriander again.
Dried mango powder, a teaspoon, and so just another big pinch, a handful of coriander, did you say?
Yes, yes. And now give this a good stir, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about mango powder first. If you want to add a level of acidity to a dish, and you want to add a degree of tartness and acidity without necessarily using a liquid, which of course lemon juice would be, then using something like mango, which has been dried, is a very good way of getting that super tartness and yet sweetness, and it just pops in your mouth. So dried mango is one of those really special ingredients that you don't know it's in it, but it really makes a lovely contribution to it.
And I can tell you, I was running around the shop trying to find dried mango powder and what it was, but it also comes in as another name. Is that right? Because it would be
Amchur, yes, which is the Hindi name for dried mangoes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Because yes, when we're looking for it, it's great to see.
And then going back to garam masala literally means, the literal translation is a warm blend of spices. And it's a composite spice which is made up of cinnamon, star anise, ground pepper, cardamom, giant cardamom, nutmeg, mace. And you basically grind up all of these spices. And it is a combination of depth of field, and yet it just has a light dusting, a really lovely flavor. So I wanted to mix this around really well and make sure all the flavors are incorporated into here.
Great. Whilst we're mixing, we're just checking in on everybody, seeing how they're doing.
Yes.
Adrian's got a two-spoon mixing technique going on. You can see Anna over there. She's still got smiles on while she's doing everything. And it's cool. Very nice. Thumbs up. Jim was completely focused. Nice.
And allow the spices to just cook through. And really, so now what you're doing is you're allowing all the spices to release their essence of flavor and meld into each other. And it's important that you don't skip these processes, because there is a change in chemistry in the dish. And if you try and move too quickly, then you're not allowing these steps to follow. And when you eat the dish, you will be able to taste the various layers of flavor. So it's important. There's a chemical process going on here. And so spices have been in the pan for about anywhere between 5, and also the key ingredient here is temperature. It has to be on a low temperature because you don't want the spices to burn. So always cook on a low temperature. And then once you've got the spices that are cooking in here, then I'd like you to add in the cream for me, please, or dairy alternative. So if you're not using cream, then by all means you can use creme fraiche or yogurt, or a soya alternative would be absolutely fine. And if you wanted to use a nut-based one, then you could even use, for example, ground cashew nuts or almonds.
And so with that, and we're talking about that as being alternatives for vegetarians and vegans,
yes.
So that's, if I just go do those all as a group, and also importantly, that main ingredient that we're using, what would you suggest as a vegan alternative to the chicken itself that would work well?
I would suggest you could use, for example, tofu, and you could do that with tofu, or you could use paneer. Paneer isn't vegan, but it's vegetarian. And to suggest that you can do this with aubergines, little finger aubergines would be fantastic in here. So
okay.
If you stir, make sure the cream is mixed in and stirred in.
Okay, so the cream is stirred in. And sorry, just so I can capture everybody for those vegan alternatives for everything else. So
yes.
You mentioned for the main, but just for, instead of the cream, you could just use a vegan alternative for any kind of cream, a dairy-free cream.
Absolutely, yes. Or even, as I say, you could use cashew nuts. You could just create a paste of cashew nuts or almonds, ground almonds, and add a bit of water to that, and then just make that into a paste and add that in. You'll get a nice texture. If you're adding nuts, then you'll get that wonderful texture from it as well.
Okay, fantastic. Whilst we're doing this, very quickly, we're going to try one last time to come back to Councilman Tai and see if we can have that conversation. Hi, Councilman.
Hello, hi.
Hi. Just to see if we can have that one quick word from you about, yes, again, to really get your perspective on the Tamil community in Kingston.
Yeah, as I was saying, it's the second largest here, and it's well established, and you'll see lots of convenient stores and restaurants as well. I myself been in Kingston for nearly 43 years now.
43 years.
I became a councillor in 2014. I'm a councillor for Tolworth and Hook Rice Ward, and I was involved in lots of volunteer organizations. I was the chair of Kingston Racial Equality Council, Global Arts. I'm a member of Rotary Club now, and we got a Tamil school as well, which has been running for nearly 34 years now. It's a Saturday school teaching language, music, and dance.
Oh, so that's a performing arts academy. Did you say that's a performing arts academy? Sorry, as you know, with Zoom, sometimes the volume goes up and down.
Yeah, it's performing arts as well. The South Indian classical dance and music, and the language as well. Was formed in 1986. It's based in Tolworth Girls' School, and it's a Saturday school, and it's been running for 34 years now.
Fantastic, that's great. And did you see that community quite integrated inside Kingston within there?
Yeah, it is actually. We got 2 Tamil councillors, and we are well into politics and even lots of other organizations as well. So it's well integrated within Kingston. In Kingston, there are about 27-28%.
I didn't hear that last bit. So I said 27 or 28% there. We're so close with that. I'll come back to you, Councillor, when we can do. Kumud, please, if you could let us know what you next.
Okay, ready now, and what I want you to do is I've cut up my chicken in the meantime whilst I was listening. So I've got my chicken into bite-sized pieces, and that is now ready to go into the sauce.
Okay, so we're just putting our chicken into the sauce. Okay, if you give us a second, Kumud, what we'll do is we'll also cut up that chicken right now. Yep. So let's do that, and then we can add it into our sauce.
And make sure that you deglaze the pan and scrape all the flavour from the oven tray and put it into the dish, because there's lots of flavour and you don't want to throw that away.
Okay. And, so, we spoke whilst we do this. Tikka masala it doesn't just be chicken tikka masala. And we spoke about the vegan alternatives, but is that as just in focus of the sauce itself? Is that what tikka masala is?
Well, if you were to look at the translation of the word, so tikka can be something there's 2 ways in which you can interpret tikka. So tikka can be that is like a skewer, for example, or tikka can also denote a heat in the dish, okay? And then the word masala means the spices. So when you think about the translation, it doesn't actually make sense. And this is where I suppose some of the dishes that you think about, Indian dishes, really translate them. They don't really translate very well. So that's why I'm kind of inclined to say that it's slightly made up for the restaurant arena, where they're kind of thinking of names to call dishes, but in translation terms, they don't actually make a lot of sense. Now, I want you to make sure that it's all stirred in really well, so that all the flavors are incorporated on top of the chicken and within. And we're going to cook this literally so that the 2 flavors can marry and come together. And so again, low temperature, and just cook it on low heat. Shake the pan so that it's all engaged and not all in a lump in the center, because otherwise the bottom is getting temperature, but it's not getting temperature on top.
So would you just use your spoon to separate that all around the pan?
Yes, I would. And sometimes, depending on what it is, just the shape is quite useful. And then we're literally just going to put the lid on for a couple of minutes. And the benefit of having a lid on means that all the flavors stay inside, but the chicken remains tender rather than drying out, because the heat is evaporating the moisture. Whereas when you cook with a lid on, the moisture stays within the pan, and therefore you get much moist chicken, and it's very tender and soft.
Okay, so obviously, yes, we need to make sure that we have the saucepans with lids for that, and how integral that is for making it to work. When it comes to this, I've always found that you said earlier on to avoid putting the moisture back into from the lid into the pan, right? So it's really important to have it there to keep the moisture in. But when you get that water that collects up, I'm, you know, so always the case that I let the...
It's not a showstopper. If a few droplets go in, it's fine. It will just add to the moisture in the pan. But sometimes there can be a lot of moisture. So that's just to avoid that. But it really does help to keep the flavour. It softens the onions, it softens the tomato, and it keeps the moisture in. And oftentimes I see people cooking curries in a wok, and I would urge you to avoid that, because if you think about how the shape of the wok is, the surface area is quite small, and then it's beveled, you know, along here, and not all woks have lids. So I would say to you that cooking curry, because curry is a sauce-based dish, you want a sauce pan, which is where the expression sauce pan comes from. So always tend to cook curries in a sauce pan or in a dish that you're going to be able to stir and get some surface area.
Okay, well, yeah, but I mean, we obviously did use a wok, but
yeah, you could, as long as you have a lid, then that's fine. And cooking in a wok, I suppose, gives you a lot of space, which is good. But you know, you just want to be aware of how much space is on the surface area, which is connecting with the pan. Especially if you're trying to brown a dish. So if, let's say, a recipe said and seal the chicken, then you wouldn't want to seal the chicken in a wok, let's say, because your surface area, which is touching the heat, is very little.
I see. Okay, and
this is where I think that cooking is so much about physics, chemistry, because it is all about moisture loss, evaporation, surface area, conducting heat. And so actually, you know, this is why I think it's so important to teach cookery in schools, and it makes the subject of physics and chemistry much more relatable when you talk about it like this.
Absolutely, that's a very good point and very valid. And I think that alongside that, and as we're talking about the science of the cooking, we've also been good at being able to talk about the politics of it. And, you know, as we said, so, you know, I want to bring this time to ask the question, as we talked, you know, how the integration of different dishes are in different cultures of food. Do we think that it's a question I want to ask from all of our guests here? With it being so popular, that the essence of English culture itself is changing with that. You know, we have a quote from British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook giving a speech that hailed chicken tikka masala as a symbol of multicultural Britain. It's often described as Britain's favourite dish. So do you think that that is the case? Would you say for yourself, Kumud, that you feel the essence of Britain is changing with all these things that you've seen moving forward within food?
I would, but before I answer that question, I'm just going to say, would you now add a little bit of moisture? Now, the volume of moisture you add, so the volume of water you add is going to be dependent on how saucy you like a dish. So I've got about 80 mils here, and I'm going to add in little sections. So I'll add about 70 mils now. And I want
70 mils of normal water there, just normal tap water.
Just regular, yeah. And I wanted to stir it around and see whether that gives you enough moisture and sauce in the dish. I'm going to move this out of the and look at what it's doing here. Can you see how there's a little bit of a sauce, but it's not too runny, which is exactly how we want it to be.
Okay.
Okay. So, and now let the water incorporate in all of the spices as well, so that the flavors don't sit apart, and let that cook on an incredibly low heat. There is moisture loss, so let that cook on a low heat.
Low heat, okay.
Give it a shake so that everything is touching the surface area. If you like moisture, then add more run.
Yeah. Get a little shake there like that.
And then the lid back on.
There we go. Okay. And yes, I mean, just to go back to that question, and
yeah,
very much
so going back to that question, the reason why I think that cooking and food actually brings people together is because first of all, you're appreciating the flavors and the kind of the variety of flavors. By cooking this dish, you're going to need to go and explore new ingredients. That's going to take you into a shop, a store that sells different ingredients. So now you're learning a little bit more about the spices and what you're adding. And it's taking you to a different aisle in the store or taking you to a different store completely. You're going to have to interact with different people in order to get the right ingredients that you want. And this is why I think that trying new things and exploring new recipes, for me, if I'm exploring Mexican food or if I'm exploring Spanish food, I'm learning about the culture and I'm learning to appreciate why different cultures cook the way they do and their heritage and the influences, their geographic, their political, their landscape. And that teaches me a little bit about a different country. And so I think that, you know, eating different types of food can only extend and broaden your horizon and makes you empathize and understand other people more than you did if you only stuck to one type of cuisine.
Absolutely, that's really well put, and I think that that's something that is amazing. Like always, have to remember when we're here. And I wanted to really touch on how you might feel specifically about English cuisine and culture, and how it is, you know, as we're saying now, kind of very heavily influenced by all that exploration that you're talking about. We have people have always been taking on different things, as Chantal had put on before earlier, that, you know, when she'd come over, she'd introduced and had been eating veal, but not in England until she actually was here and eating it. But now, would we say that these kind of things are actually within the fabric of English cooking as well? Would you agree? And you can disagree with that as well.
Yeah, because what's happened is that people have understood that they enjoy the flavor of cumin, and now they've taken cumin and added it into a dish that they might make, or that they're adding garlic, or that they're thinking, this mango powder, perhaps I could use it another way, and I can add it to embellish and you know, change the flavors of another dish. So I think that it influences their own cooking as well, and it's going to give them so much more confidence to add a whole variety of spices. So even what could have been a simple plain English dish. So for example, let me give you for instance, let's say shepherd's pie, okay? So if I'm cooking a shepherd's pie, in the mix of the mincemeat that I'm making, I will also add some of those other spices that I used in Spanish, Italian, or Indian cuisine, because it's going to make the meat taste different. I'll give you a for instance in that. So mustard was brought to us by the Romans. And it's when the Romans came here that they brought mustard to our shores. And the influence of this, that it's going to give you significant depth of field. So if I'm cooking a meat dish and it's in a European English, let's say, recipe, I would always add mustard to that dish, as well as adding thyme, for example, so fresh thyme, which is going to give you so much more depth of field and so much medicinally. So it's going to aid the digestion. It's going to help to break it down. It's antibacterial. So there's lots of influences that I think has improved my English cooking by adding other herbs and spices to the dish.
I mean, and so great hearing your knowledge of the history of all those different spices and bringing that in. I'd like to actually then move across to Adrian and also ask, especially someone you mentioned, your background. Could you please repeat for me?
My parents are Jamaican. I was born and raised here.
And so that's part of you have experience of a lot of people coming over at a certain time period into England. What's your take on exactly as what Kumid has said with the influences that we've had, but also the fact that it's very much now accepted as part of English culture? Would you consider yourself English?
Considering that I was born and raised here, I definitely say that I was British, and you know, I know for sure that when I go back and see my friends and family in Jamaica, they call me English. So definitely English would be part of that moniker. Englishman actually would be the full title. But I'd say really that, you know, when you get to humanize, you get to understand a person more when you understand how they eat. And when you share that, when you get a shared love of that eating, of that cuisine, then I think that really helps to definitely bring people together. And the fact that dishes like chicken tikka masala, like chicken korma, like rice and peas are, I would say, known across every single corner of the United Kingdom, says a great deal about the way that eating has changed. I really do believe that it helps people to understand each other more. So for me, I think that moving to the new Britain will definitely happens through a transition through food.
Amazing, thank you. I'm going to move straight on to actually Councillor Dai on that. Could you, if you're able to, I think we just need to unmute, yes? What would be your opinion on that as well, you know, in terms of being part of that English culture yourselves?
Even after you spoke to me.
The Tamil community is well integrated, even though I wasn't born here. I mean, I said I lived here 50 years. And over the years, I've seen so many changes in UK, and particularly in Kingston. And we are, you know, truly integrated society now. As I said, there are so many different diverse communities in Kingston. We organize so many events. You know, Marcus himself is involved in Kingston Carnival, which is a multicultural event showcasing all the diversity here in Kingston.
Right. No, of course, that's completely true. And I think if I move over as well to Paul and Chantal on that, thank you, Catherine. If you could let us know, what would you consider, you know, as you were saying, Chantal, about bringing the food that you've experienced here and from home, and now it's also part of here. Do you think that these multicultural groups, especially ones, as Adrian had said, you know, from England and Commonwealth, that we now have as staples within this country, that now is now an integral part of English culture and the English makeup?
Well, most definitely. And you only have to look at all the chefs. You have a British or an English chef, and his speciality he would be cooking nothing but Chinese or Singaporean food, not a single English dish. So definitely it's completely integrated into British English society, yes.
And similarly, marrying a Belgian, since my mother passed away, I've never had a roast dinner. And when she was alive, I used to love things like traditional English food, like stuffed heart. A Belgian would feed that to their dog and say that humans don't eat that. So I don't eat English food really to the same extent as I did when I was growing up at home with my parents.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
My cousin's wife bakes me steak and kidney pie because that's a traditional old English dish which I would never have at home.
I guess having that traditional roots is still obviously important alongside everything else that we're experiencing, these new things that we now integrate within them. What I'd like to say also, if I go back to Kumud and just check on the dish, I know that you've had it for a little bit with the chicken cooking. Could we let us know what the next step is on that?
Yes, okay, so we've finished. So it's ready to stop. And now what I'd like you to do is just take a tiny dusting of garam masala and just tiny dust going over. Then I want you to take the lemon juice and just pour the lemon juice over it.
So the garam masala, is it just a pinch of the garam masala?
Tiny little dusting thing of it. And then I want you to...
I'm so sorry, would you say to take it off the heat or still keep it on the heat right now?
No, take it off the heat now.
There we go. Okay.
And then I want you to dust over with some fresh coriander. And then basically this dish is ready to serve.
Oh, amazing. I'm gonna finish with a question, but before that, we'll just have this serving. Like you said.
Can I just say, you know, Adrian was talking about Caribbean food.
Yes.
I'll show you what I've got soaking. So I am soaking here some kidney beans.
Aha!
Because I'm going to make, or my daughter is going to make Caribbean rice and peas a little bit later today. So do you see how much representation of cuisines there are in any household?
Yeah, that's it. You're right, and you know, that's, as you said, that's one English household, and there's so many different groups within that you're catering for. So your house is very reflective of that entirely. And I think go on, please.
I'm just saying that this dish is ready, and I would recommend that this dish could be served with naan bread. It could be served with rice, and if it was rice, then it would be plain, just steamed or boiled rice. Or indeed, you could just have it in a paratha or chapati or roti or whatever it is that you like to eat it with. But this is literally ready to go.
Amazing. I mean, we can't thank you enough for this. Sorry, I can see you've got one more thing you want to say there. What did you want to say?
I wanted to say bon appetito and enjoy, and I enjoyed making chicken tikka masala.
Thank you so much for taking your time to be able to give us your expertise on how to make it this way. And it smells and looks delicious. I can't wait for us to actually taste it. If we could quickly just see everybody else's dishes, if they are able to show us on screen what they've made. This is ours. Thank you very much. I'm a very, very patient partner in doing all this. Oh wow, amazing, amazing guys. That's very nice.
Good.
Thank you very much. It's really good.
In the bucket,
There we go. Nice. Very nice.
Oh,
Very nice. Oh, beautiful portions there. Fantastic. Nice food. Oh wow.
Wow.
Lovely garnish there. Nice guys.
it's delicious.
Yeah. Everyone at home is also on YouTube. Please post an image of your final dish and hashtag it dishes of New Britain, to be able to have it complete. Very nice, Alexa.
We'll have it tonight.
Nice guys.
I'll be making some naan bread tonight.
Oh,
Sorry,
fantastic.
I'll be making some naan bread tonight, and then we'll have it with naan bread.
Nice. Yes, I think we'll be having. Oh, that's beautiful. That's so good. Wow.
My wife has cooked some rice, so we're going to have it with rice.
You're going to have it with rice? That'd be good. Yes, of course.
Rice. So we're going to have it with rice.
Oh man, I wish we could come over to yours and have that rice as well. That looks beautiful. Well, guys, can I ask? Then thank you all of you for taking part, and everyone that's been involved in this whole production and everything. You know, from the organisers as well as obviously Councilman Dai and his wife, Leta, and Paul Cox and his wife Chantal, for taking your time to do this with us, as well as Adrian. It's amazing for you to be able to do this on a weekend day. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this with me. You've been amazing. And Anna and Marcus as well for being involved in this. Everybody that has been in this has been amazing. We just want to extend that thanks out to you all. On top of that, I just want to ask and leave you with a question of really, what do you think it is? You know what? I've forgotten what my last question is. Oh, yeah, that's it. What is it to be English today? So if I start with you, Kumud, could I ask what do you think it is to be English today?
To be English is to be open, welcoming, and be able to enjoy everybody else's cultures whilst maintaining your own.
Very nice. And Councilman Tai?
Well, I agree with the chef. You know that she really summed it up. Yeah, it's to be an open and embracing all the cultures, enjoying their food, and that's exactly what the English or the neighborhood is all about.
Fantastic. That's very true. Very on point. And for Paul and Chantal, what would you say to add to that?
I don't think I could find something else. It's being open, welcoming, accepting as well, that we're all different and accepting that.
For me, it was summed up when, as a racing driver, I was racing on the continent, and before the race, the clerk of the course interviewed every nationality in their own tongue. So he spoke about 7 languages. He was a very interesting man. And finally, he came to the British, but he called them the English. And he said, I've just lectured everyone here on a sporting event and fair play. I can't say that to an Englishman, the country of fair play.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's very well put on that. And Adrian, yes, can I ask you as well? What would be your take on that? What is it to be English?
I think a lot of it's been covered. It is definitely about being open. It's about enjoying the mixture of different cultures, different civilizations that have brought us to this point, while keeping a strong core of English culture and English practice. So it's a blend together as opposed to one washing out another.
Very well put and very true. I think it's something to keep in mind with. And I genuinely don't think I can add anything on top of what you've all put within that. I agree with all of that of being English. I consider myself English. I was born here. My background is Sri Lankan. My partner was born in Sri Lanka, but is also part of the makeup of the country. And you know, we benefit from everything that is here, and we think that we add to that as well. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, I think, you know, English, whether it be English or any other nationality, is kind of accepting that it's a dynamic state. So being kind of welcoming to everything that's going to influence you, as well as keeping what's, you know, at the core. And, you know, that maybe people that's coming into a new nationality or people that's already there. It's to kind of understand that it is very dynamic, and I think that adds to, you know, acceptance as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's so important in line with everything we've been saying here. Can I just check in with Marcus and Anna? Is there anything you'd like to add on that point yourselves as trustees, and on top of that from Colombo's point of view?
I would like to say a massive thank you. When unfortunately we're going through a sad time, it is a sad time. It is sad everywhere. And when the pandemic started, the team of trustees in Quilombo, we met and we were discussing what could we do to try and minimize it. The idea came up, a big team was working to try and get that together. And I think it couldn't be better. It couldn't be better. I think if we think about best case scenario, worst case scenario, and medium scenario, we got a superb scenario in this event. So I really want to thank Chef Kumudi Ganji. Thank you so much. It's been brilliant. I'm really wanting to run that dish. And you know, so thank you for you. The Cooking Academy. We're going to be showing more about your work in our social media. So thank you so much. Councillor Tai and Lata Thailand, thank you. I know Councillor Tai for a while, always been very supportive of what we do from when we start. Thank you again for being there. Paul and Chantal Cox, amazing. Thank you. Paul believes on us as well, not just in the Quilombo, but in the Capoeira school. Thanks for being there. Thanks for being part. Thanks for everybody. Anna, Adrian, Paul Whiteley, and Mona Lisa, the trustees in Quilombo, have been there from day one, putting everything together. We created a thinking hub, which we had Joe, Shino, Alexa, and Luana You have been doing research and seeing how best we could deliver the event. So thank you for you guys. Behind the scenes right now, we have Megan and Charlie looking after the social media, the YouTube, the comments, posting, and getting there. And we have Lucky and Peter looking after the broadcasting. Lucky, it was amazing. Radim, thank you so much for being there, for support. Everybody else who is here. So I think this is it. Just to be grateful to hear the cooking, to hear the whole debate. Everybody be very open-minded about discussing something that sometimes it's not that easy. So I just want to really, really be grateful for it and thank everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah. Just to say, to Kumud, again, thank you so much for being leading on this whole thing and being able to allow us to learn so much about the dish, as well as being able to have this forum to talk easily and openly with each other, which has been really wonderful. So, sorry, I didn't catch that.
You are very, very welcome. It's been wonderful to be able to share this whole experience and just bring people together and allow them to understand what the dish is about, what the spices are about. So it's been an absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. And again, you can find out more about the Cooking Academy through our channels, as well as through our own site and social media, which we'll post more on. Everybody at home as well, thank you so much for taking part. We can't wait to see what dishes you post up and to hear everything you're doing. Okay, so please, can everyone have a round of applause for everything you've done? And please, we'll see you again soon. All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.